What does love look like? Love looks like taking care of people when they need help. Why don't you go ahead and close your eyes and let's take a few deep breaths together. Just come and get quiet in your heart before God. It's okay if you need to get some wiggles out. If you feel like you need to move your body, that's fine. Just try to rest and settle in. That's why we take a couple of deep breaths together. God, I pray that you will release our imagination and help us to hear you speak to us during this time together. We open our hands to you and we open our hearts to you. Come, Holy Spirit. In the Gospel of Luke, we read a story about a man who had an important question for Jesus. The man wanted to know what he must do to have the kind of life that God wanted him to have, a life that was full of goodness and abundance and love. Imagine that you're listening in on the conversation. Imagine that you're standing right next to Jesus as you hear this conversation. So there's a man and he asks Jesus, "What must I do to have the best kind of life?" And Jesus, seeing that the man was religious, gave him a very straightforward answer. He said, "You know what kind of life God invites you into, don't you? Tell me, what's your understanding?" And the man gave a pretty good answer. He said this. He said, "The good life comes to those who love God with all of their heart and energy, and also love their neighbors as well as they love themselves." "That's a good answer," Jesus replied. But then the man had another question. "And who is my neighbor?" And Jesus answered him by telling a story. So again, imagine that you're sitting next to Jesus as he tells this story. Imagine that you're right next to him. Jesus begins the story and he says this. There was once a man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, and on the way he was attacked by robbers. They took his clothes, beat him up, and went off, leaving him half dead. Luckily, a priest was on his way down the same road, but when he saw him, he angled across to the other side. And then a Levite religious man showed up. He also avoided the injured man. A Samaritan traveling the road came on him. When he saw the man's condition, his heart went out to him. He gave him first aid, disinfecting and bandaging his wounds. Then he lifted him onto his donkey, led him to an inn, and made him comfortable. In the morning, he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, "Take good care of him. If it costs any more, put it on my bill. I'll pay you on my way back." What do you think? Which of the 3 became a neighbor to the man attacked by the robbers? "The one who treated him kindly," the man responded. And Jesus says, "Go and do the same." So imagine you're sitting next to Jesus as he finishes the story, and Jesus reaches out his hand for yours and offers to go on a walk with you. Imagine he says your name and takes your hand. And then Jesus begins to ask you some questions. He begins to ask you about the story you've just listened to. He says to you, who do you relate to in the story? Think for a moment about the people in the story that Jesus has told. There's a man who was robbed and beaten. There were 2 people who passed him by. And there was the man, the Samaritan, who stopped and helped the beaten man. Continue to imagine that you're with Jesus and you're having a conversation about the story. Who are the people in your life right now who you think might need some help? Who are the people in your life right now who you think might need some help? Who comes to mind? What are some of the ways that Jesus may be inviting you to be like the Samaritan in the story? It's okay if you don't have someone come to mind right away, but just sit with this question. Who are the people right now that you have an opportunity to love? Just ask that God would bring someone to your mind. And imagine now that as you walk with Jesus, you notice there is someone on the side of the road who seems to be in need. It's a man who has been badly beaten, and someone has torn his clothes. So imagine that you're right next to Jesus, and you see someone like someone in the story, a man who's been beaten and left for the side of the road. What do you want to do when you see the man? I want you to imagine running over to the man with Jesus right by your side. Imagine helping the man up and offering him a drink of water. What does it feel like to have Jesus by your side as you help this man? You take a few moments of quiet and try to imagine what happens next as you and Jesus are helping the man. Ask Jesus right now to help you finish the task of love in this story. So using your imagination, how would you finish the story? God invites us to live a life of love. Love looks like being patient and kind and not making a list of people's mistakes. Love looks like inviting people who may be left out. And love looks like taking care of people when they need help.